Chapter 384. Luonan was certain that the connection between his soul body and fleshly body was still there even though he had moved through the void. It was just that the distortion was severe, weaker than it had ever been. He couldn't estimate the distance at all, and his perception of the details was also a problem. Luonan was a bit flustered when he sensed what was happening over there. He didn't care about anything else, but he was worried that his aunts would come home and see him lying on the bed like a corpse. They would send him directly to the hospital. Even though Luonan had 10,000 hopes of doing an in-depth exploration of the cloud world and ascertaining Snake Tongue's whereabouts early on, reality was right there. He still had to kneel. With a thought, in the empty center of the condensation ring structure, the new structure formed by the external neuron released a corresponding signal. The soul cloak's interference method changed, and in an instant the world changed. In the depths of the clouds, the messy tail ape who had been teased for a long time was still in a rage. The threat that had troubled it for a long time had suddenly disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared. The mush tail ape had a stupefied expression, and it circled around on the spot a few more times before leaving resentfully. Luonan had already returned to the normal world. It was a familiar place. Just like last time, it was still in the tree hole of the withered tree sandbar, a kilometer away from Gear's main building. Sure enough, there was a clear pattern for entering and exiting the cloud world. It was set up intentionally. Luonan was both shocked and impressed by his mother's design back in the day. Unfortunately, he was unfilial as a son. He had casually thrown out a piece of trash and caused trouble. At this moment, the connection between the soul and the physical body was much clearer. Luonan also knew that it was a false alarm. It wasn't that his aunt and uncle had returned. Instead, it was his wristband vibrating to alert him that someone was contacting him. However, if uncle and aunt called, it would also be a headache. The wristband was not like the hex ear. It did not have the ability to listen to calls from a distance of 80 kilometers. Luonan knew that he had to go back. He reluctantly circled around the tree hole, flew into the air and sensed Gear from afar. Only then did he flee into the air. On the way back, Luonan once again set a new record for the speed of his soul body, traveling 80 kilometers in just 4 minutes. This was equivalent to a speed of 1,200 kilometers per hour. It was already infinitely close to the speed of sound. Actually, it wasn't impossible to reach the speed of sound. It was just that Luonan didn't know what sort of state the external neuron would be in when it broke through the sound barrier. It was better to be cautious and experiment when he had free time in the future. Luonan anxiously looked at his wristband when he got home. He conveniently returned his soul to his body. When his body and soul became one, he finally realized what was going on. External neuron. Just as he thought about it, he realized that the external neuron had returned to the depths of his brain and transformed into its original form of a long electric line. It circled around and formed the carrier of the divine wheel structure, supporting the iceberg-like soul energy. Quite the initiative. If the structure of the condensation ring came in, Luonan shook his head in a hurry. He gave up on this standard idea that water had gotten into his brain. He got up and stretched his neck to look at the caller ID on his wristband. He definitely wouldn't be able to pick up the first call. Later on, the person called twice more before stopping. But luckily, it wasn't the uncle and aunt that Luonan was most worried about. It was an unexpected acquaintance. Luonan blinked. It was actually Mo Han, Sister Pomegranate, who was ranked 16th in the younger generation of his uncle's family. Filled with doubts, he dialed the number back. The call was quickly picked up. The person on the other side said hello twice, and the surroundings seemed to be very noisy. Sure. Sister Han, I was taking a shower just now, so I took off my bracelet. Is something the matter? Luonan forcefully pushed the dangerous words back into his mouth. He blurted out a lie and assumed an obedient posture. Mo Han switched the ambient mode and her voice soon became clear. She was in a good mood. She didn't care whether Luonan's reason was true or false. She laughed and said, I just confirmed it with Peng 17. I'll be there at 7 o'clock sharp tomorrow night. Little Nanster, prepare to receive me. Tomorrow? Isn't it tomorrow? *CK he forgot that there was still a torment. Luonan opened his mouth, but the words of refusal didn't leave his mouth in the end. Mo Han was a lively and straightforward girl. There were only a few people of the same age in the Mo family who truly treated Luonan as a younger brother. After the incident at Frost River Reality, Mo Han even made a special trip to the hospital to visit him. Speaking of which, didn't this sister feel any lingering fear last time at Frost River Reality? That's right. Their group of people had been brought back to the police station early on. The impression they left behind was just a group fight. As for the situation in the news report, it was mostly separated by a layer. In this way, Luo Nan was the one with a shadow in his heart? Luo Nan ended the call with Mo Han with absurd emotions. He turned his hand and called Mo Peng. The moment the call connected, Luo Nan bluntly asked, "What the hell is with this constantly expanding team?" Mo Peng was yelling, "Do you think I'm happy? It's clearly a get-together. Isn't Shirlu helping her family by going there? So hurry up and find someone. Find a fierce and handsome guy to bewitch her. Don't ruin our brother's plan. Plan your sister." "I don't have a sister. Go find my sister." Luo Nan thought of Mo Ye, who was about to embark on her return trip. He immediately shivered and said unhappily, "Just how many people are you bringing? Which idiot leaked the information?" I admit it." Luo Nan was so stupid that he cried. He simply hung up. Luo Nan looked at the time again. His aunt and uncle could come back at any time. It was no longer suitable for his out-of-body state. He could only wait until nightfall to discuss it. His soul body withdrew, but Luo Nan's mind was still spinning in circles above the clouds. He diligently pondered on how to detect the shape of the sky over there as soon as possible. He wanted to find Snake Tongue's whereabouts, but he didn't have a clue for a time. After thinking for a long time, he changed his angle. He remembered that there was still a very crucial question. Where in the world was the region above the clouds? Boundless, thick clouds that defied common sense. Burning bloody light flowed between the gaps in the clouds. The powerful mushed-mouth ape flew here and there. Each element was extremely distinctive, but when gathered together, it was like a casually drawn demonic face. It was hard to distinguish. The reason for this was that the elements that formed the demonic face were somewhat contrary to the logic of reality. Luo Nan was even thinking that this wasn't some place on Earth, but a fantasy land. Luo Nan put aside his fantasy thoughts for now. He needed to consider the problem from a practical and measurable perspective. He didn't consider the thick clouds for now. He didn't care about the source of the bloody light. He just started with the mushed-mouth ape that he had observed for the longest time. The mushed-mouth ape should be a type of mutant without a doubt. It had gregarious tendencies and powerful strength. According to the knowledge he had learned, high-level mutants had quite a strong sense of territory. Only a small portion of the mutants resided in large groups, and the area was relatively fixed. If Luo Nan was able to investigate its species, there was a high chance that he could determine where on Earth this world was. Luo Nan gave it a try. He transformed the image of this monster into a mental signal and searched on the psychic wave network, but he didn't find anything. Clearly, relevant information didn't exist in the public information. He once again had the idea of obtaining classified information. This was a bit more troublesome. Right now, the Xia City branch's secrecy system was being implemented step by step. Anyone who wished to access classified information and utilize related resources needed to apply for access privileges. The threshold wasn't high aside from a very small portion of special information. However, access records would be left behind for future tracing. It was said that the secret level of the database was sealed off in passing after the branch exchanged large amounts of information with the military. He Yuan's work was certainly involved in this. No matter what other people said, she was modifying the behavior of the ability users of Xia City bit by bit. Luo Nan first subconsciously applied for an intelligent search service, but he suddenly reacted and chose to cancel it. This was a bit of selfishness. He didn't want to expose too much information regarding the cloud world. He hadn't even figured out his mother's inheritance, yet he wanted everyone to know about it. What was the point of this? The more he wanted to protect his food, the more Snake Tongue's existence was a thorn in Luo Nan's heart. He needed to find that female ghost as soon as possible no matter what. Luo Nan nearly wanted to kill his way to gear, but he was still rational. He knew that he couldn't cause any new problems before dinner, so he forcefully suppressed the urge. He needed to adjust his state of mind. He thought for a bit and took advantage of the time he was applying for access privileges to the database to borrow the Mutant Species Encyclopedia, Inner World Edition, and some other video and text materials related to mutants. He also pulled up the video materials from last year's intermediate training class, supplementing the handouts and notes Papercut had sent him. He needed to act like an obedient child at home before dinner. Using the precise and nimble dripping sword to pass the time was just right. Luonan didn't deny that he had a very special feeling toward the dripping sword. Not to mention the dripping sword's own effects, the structure of the condensation ring had truly made a great contribution. It drew in the external neuron to form a central structure that transformed interference power, thus forming a soul cloak. It could freely choose the direction of interference on the mental or material plane, freeing Luonan from his weak and frail body. Needless to say, Luonan would owe this favor when he entered the cloud world. Once a person developed a sense of intimacy toward a certain skill, they would possess an abundant driving force. At first, Luonan just wanted to pass the time, but when he truly began to research, his standards unconsciously rose higher. Not only did he need to improve upon the core structure of the condensation ring, but he also needed to carefully ponder over several auxiliary structures. Speaking of which, he was quite curious. The condensation ring had undergone a body rebirth with the external neuron. Could auxiliary structures be added to it? So what state would it be and what effects would it have? With a single thought, Luonan simply went into an out-of-body state. With just a slight thought, the condensation ring's structure appeared from the nothingness of his consciousness. It was engraved in the void, and the external neuron seemed to possess intelligence. It sprang out at the same time, following the relevant structure to take shape. Since the process was extremely short, Luonan couldn't tell whether or not his consciousness had directly controlled the external neuron to form the condensation ring. Also, he could faintly feel a tiny point in the hollow structure of the condensation ring. This was the key structure that opened the door to the cloud world in the atrium of Gear, affected by the cyclotron acceleration. Whoa, it even has a memory function. Luonan was truly convinced. The structure at the center of the condensation ring was already below the nanometer scale. It was impossible for Luonan to study it with his current abilities. His mind rippled a few times and he returned to practicing with the dripping sword. He first experimented. He assembled the three auxiliary structures, the guidance, the amplification, and the acceleration, in a probing manner. In the structural design of the dripping sword, the amplification structure was a stabilizer. It ensured the continuity and stability of the long-distance effects of soul strife. The acceleration structure was like the nitrogen-oxygen acceleration system of a modified car. It was responsible for explosive acceleration in a short period of time. On the other hand, the guidance structure was used in micro-operations to increase the sensitivity of operations. These three structures complemented each other with the basic condensation ring. Every time a structure was superimposed, its controllability and explosive power would increase. As for the sharpening and rupturing structures, they belonged to the attack modules. They were mainly used on the condensed water beads. Luonan had yet to try them out. Luonan was actually quite worried that the condensation ring, after undergoing a body rebirth, would reject the other auxiliary structures. Therefore he placed them very carefully. The early stages were pretty good. The new version of the condensation ring accepted several auxiliary structures very generously. Though there were differences between the real and the virtual, the control was quite smooth. Luonan was just about to be happy when he saw the condensation ring split into lightning. The lightning leaped into the three auxiliary structures. The auxiliary structures didn't even circulate for half a circle before they collapsed one after another. It was hard to support them. Luonan didn't feel defeated when facing this scene. He just felt that it was a bit familiar. Wasn't this the situation when the external neuron and the condensation ring were connected? Luonan thought about the tiny structure at the center of the condensation ring. Could it be that the new version of the condensation ring had the spare power to perform a body rebirth on the other auxiliary structures? Luonan carefully sensed the entire process of the auxiliary structures collapsing. He knew that he couldn't let the external neuron take the blame. In fact, he had learned the auxiliary structures quickly. They weren't polished like the condensation ring. The structures were too rough and they weren't stable enough. The lightning was uniform and there was air leaking in all directions. There was no value in using them as a reference for reconstruction. In other words, he needed to meticulously sculpt the auxiliary structures and dress them up beautifully in order to gain the favor of the external neuron. What the hell? Ridicule was ridicule, but Luo Nan was still looking forward to it. This precise and exquisite painting style was very much in line with his aesthetic standards. And if he could really do it, wouldn't it be a dripping sword structure completely forged from the external neuron? Metal. Actually, Luo Nan didn't know if the external neuron's peculiar material could be considered metal. But the flexible and tough combination of material molding was perhaps the sword pill of novels? When the time came for him to use it against an enemy, the enemy would think it was a bead of water, but it was actually a solid particle. Its penetrative power and lethality would increase by 10-fold or 100-fold. That would be fun. He needed to think about it a bit more. The external neuron was such a precious thing. If he were to toss it out like a hidden weapon and it was taken away by some powerhouse, he would be better off dead. Luo Nan began a new practice amidst this tangled mood. The 5 auxiliary structures were far inferior to the condensation ring in terms of complexity. But he still needed a lot of painstaking practice in order to reach the level of refinement and precision. Luo Nan was smarter or luckier than the others. He was the first to create a blue or purple level condensation ring. He had a reference template and a standard. Luo Nan attracted the external neuron to undergo a rebirth. It was tantamount to having an indestructible carrier and testing instrument. Any of the auxiliary structures that lacked precision would not be able to pass the threshold of Luo Nan's subconscious. Even if he managed to fool it, the external neuron would feel that the quality of the harem wasn't good. Electricity would burst forth and any defective product would immediately disintegrate. This was another torturous process. Luo Nan had just wanted to kill time before dinner, but he never expected that he would spend the next 4 or 5 hours on these auxiliary structures. He had no choice. When a person's brain became excited and their concentration increased, it was not easy to reverse their direction. Chapter 385. Luo Nan's mind wasn't too good the next day. He sat in the classroom, his mind dispirited most of the time. His mind was blank during class. Not a single bit of what the teacher said entered his ears. Xuelei only met up with him before the 3rd class. He was shocked to see Luo Nan's condition. "You broke your training?" "I stayed up late." Luo Nan's answer was concise and clear. He had been practicing the dripping sword until midnight yesterday. After the night class, he couldn't help but go into an out-of-body state. He crossed half the city and entered the cloud world from gear. He continued his search, constantly familiarizing himself with the environment. His search yielded no results, but he didn't sleep the entire night. His mind was dispirited from going back and forth. Xuelei was a clever person. His first reaction was, "Did you miss your morning and evening classes?" "Nope." Luo Nan rolled his eyes and yawned. Xuelei spoke very seriously. "It's about the same even if you didn't miss it. Blood and energy are nourished and consumed during training. It's very complicated. Your way of playing is like lighting a lamp and boiling oil. The effects are halved." "Then what should I do? How about I sleep for a bit during class and you help me keep an eye on things?" "That's fine too." Luo Nan reached out to poke him. "Bad friend." Luo Nan buried his head in the crook of his arm before Xuelei could retort. He fell asleep in the span of 2 or 3 breaths. To be honest, although he hadn't left the house for the past 2 days, he had experienced too many changes, absorbed too much information and learned too many things. His brain had reached its limit and he really couldn't take it anymore. In any case, this was a public class. The enormous lecture hall was the best cover. A few possibilities flashed through Luo Nan's mind before he fell asleep. For example, Xuelei calling him, Peony calling him to begin the search mission, the society calling him, and so on. But things were hard to predict. What truly woke him up from his dreams wasn't any of these factors. It was a stimulation that came from the mental plane. It came from a position that seemed very close, but he couldn't grasp it. The Wraith sign? Luo Nan's thoughts captured the most crucial factor. But before he could truly sort out the clues, a scorching and explosive feeling suddenly exploded. It followed the incorporeal connection on the mental plane and came rumbling, shaking the god wheel. The situation was simply like a meteorite falling from the heavens. It smashed into a vast ocean of glaciers. The god wheel shook for a moment, and the surging and abundant soul strength created waves. It instantly formed a dozen or so tides that came crashing down. Luo Nan was really caught off guard. The god wheel frame constructed from the external neuron was stable, but the feeling of pain and danger was real. He screamed. His body tensed up and his entire body. His knee hit the bottom of the table and the tables and chairs in the lecture hall were fixed. A muffled sound rang out and Luo Nan's entire body bent like a prawn. He hugged his knees and sat down. Xuelei was shocked to the side. The first thing he did after coming to his senses was to throw his entire body over to protect Luo Nan. He believed that Luo Nan had suffered an assassination attempt from headquarters or some other power. He wanted to prevent Luo Nan from suffering a second injury. The classroom was silent for a moment, and then the lecturer on the podium said coldly, "What are you doing?" In the next 3 seconds, the classroom went from buzzing to roaring laughter, and the discipline in the classroom instantly collapsed. As one of the best educational institutions in Xia City, Acumen College had never been a place where one could spend their days leisurely. Although they didn't go as far as to implement some sort of militarized classroom discipline, there were naturally conduct points and strict examinations to punish students who caused trouble in class. Luo Nan had shaken the entire lecture theater to the point of buzzing. Xuelei had directly pounced on Luo Nan with the weight of MT Tai. If Luo Nan didn't raise his blade and make an example out of Xuelei, he would be letting down the class time system. The lecturer on the lectern was a middle-aged woman in her 40s or 50s. Her facial features were quite good-natured, but her expression had turned cold and hard after receiving such a torment from Luo Nan and Xuelei. "Get up, I'm fine." Luo Nan struggled to break free from Xuelei's oppression. He endured the pain in his knees with great difficulty, and when he straightened up he saw this scene. He was already exhausted to begin with, and his reaction was much worse than usual. He was even more sluggish, and he could only display a stupefied expression, unable to do anything. Xuelei was about the same to the side. He still hadn't switched out from his bodyguard identity. Right at this moment, the young female teaching assistant, who was a support staff member, walked over to the lecturer's side. She said something in a soft voice. The middle-aged female lecturer's anger was suppressed and she spoke coldly, "Students, please stand up." Luo Nan and Xuelei glanced at each other and they obediently stood up. "What are your names?" Luo Nan and Xuelei had already accepted their fate. They lowered their heads and said their names, but they were a bit vague. The female lecturer didn't care. She just said, "Students, if any one of you isn't feeling well, you can go to the infirmary and get treated as soon as possible. Don't disturb the other students in class." Yes. He's having hysteria. I'll immediately take him." Xuelei reacted and he directly made Luo Nan into a mental patient. He made a supporting gesture and he supported Luo Nan as they walked down step by step amidst the chaotic laughter of the students. Luo Nan's knee was injured and he really was limping. The two were like this. They didn't dare to raise their heads and they cut a sorry figure as they left the classroom. Luo Nan's absent-minded mind recovered a bit just before they left the room. He noticed one thing. The young female teaching assistant who had persuaded the lecturer was actually someone he knew. Xianxia. They hadn't contacted each other since the incident at Ocean Sky Cloud City. Presumably, Xianxia needed quite a long period of time to sort out her emotions. But he never expected that they would meet again in such a manner. Luo Nan didn't feel comfortable saying hello, so he left in a hurry with Xuelei. But the bell rang before the elevator even reached the bottom floor. Luo Nan only found out after asking Xuelei that it was the last class of the morning. This fact hurt Luo Nan quite a bit. Things wouldn't have escalated to this extent if he had been a few minutes late. His wristband vibrated at this time and the name of the contact appeared. Luo Nan rushed to pick up the phone. "Senior Sister Tian, thanks for just now." The caller was none other than Xianxia. Her tone was gentle and calm, just like a friend she often interacted with. "It's nothing. Teacher Wu has a very good heart. She asked for your name and she didn't scan it through the class system. That means that she wants you to open up. Otherwise it would be hard to avoid deducting conduct points. That's all thanks to Senior Sister Tian's help. I'll treat you to a meal later." Luo Nan spoke in passing and he suddenly felt that these words were very familiar. It seemed that he had said these words more than once in the past few days. Actually, this was normal. As his social range expanded, his interpersonal relationships gradually became more complex. It was hard to avoid social interactions. What other words could it be if he didn't say these words? Chapter 386. That's right. This was in line with Ocean Sky Cloud City's victim setting. Luo Nan thought this way, but when he heard the sigh he felt quite subtle. His mind became much more lively and quick-witted. He immediately smiled and said, "Then Senior will treat me to a meal." Tianxi reacted extremely quickly. "Tonight. Today." Luo Nan jumped in fright. "I have an event tonight." "Really?" Tianxi's tone was filled with doubt. Perhaps she was even a bit disappointed. This made Luo Nan feel embarrassed. His mind spun and he suddenly had an idea. "All right. Senior, you should come and participate tonight." Tianxi was surprised. "Invite me?" "Yeah. You actually know them. It's Mo Peng and Mo Han. Remember? They're your cousins? Last time at Frost River Reality." Her voice suddenly cut off. Luo Nan's mind became more and more agile. He knew that Tianxi was probably a bit embarrassed. After all, the last event was to create an opportunity for her to socialize with Luo Nan's third cousin Mo Chiu. It seemed that nothing had come of it. It really wasn't that kind of thing to participate again. Well, with Luo Nan's social skills, this kind of slip-up was inevitable. Luo Nan didn't know how to remedy the situation when Tianxi chuckled. "I just happened to bring Tianqi. He's close to your age. We had a good time last time. I heard that he keeps in contact with someone from your family." "Huh. Something like that happened?" Regardless of whether Tianxi was telling the truth or not, it was fine as long as she didn't mind. Luo Nan let out a sigh of relief. For him, this arrangement could be considered as killing two birds with one stone. Mo Peng and Mo Han were both devil incarnate level fellows. There should be someone older to suppress them. Tianxi had a socializing experience with Mo Chiu, so she had an awkward halo. Let's see how those two fellows deal with this. Wasn't it a bit despicable to think like this? Luo Nan ended his communication with Tianxi and shook his head. His thoughts spun but his expression sank. The event tonight was just a small matter. The extraordinary power and corresponding information that the Wraith sign transmitted just now were the key issues that needed to be carefully understood. Logically speaking, the Wraith sign was still in the Blood Flame Order's territory. He was herded, every day, searching for other faced arachnid avatars to devour. From a city's safety perspective, the Wraith sign was a first-rate scavenger. This sort of action of the Wraith sign had brought quite a bit of trouble to Luo Nan in the past. The Wraith sign supported Luo Nan on the path of imbalance between body and soul, walking further and further. However, ever since Luo Nan constructed a clear framework of body and soul, coupled the rotation of the God Gear and Body Gear, the Wraith sign's sudden hunt and devour, the negative effects it brought to him grew smaller and smaller. Luo Nan was more than happy to leave the Wraith sign with the Blood Flame Order to collect some information and secrets. But in that instant the Wraith sign exploded with an attack on the mental plane. It could be said to be the most intense attack Luo Nan had ever encountered since he received the Wraith sign. According to Luo Nan's conjecture and understanding, the instantaneous undulation was very much like when it suddenly encountered a powerful enemy. It unleashed its full combat power, then it won the battle and swallowed up the enemy. Only then did the comet collide with the Earth appear. The truly intense segment only lasted for an instant. Luo Nan didn't have the time to see it before he missed it. Later on he was distracted by the embarrassing incident in the classroom. By the time he had the time to pay attention, the Wraith sign had already calmed down. Luo Nan could only see the Blood Flame Order's herder, Elder Mo Luan, from the Wraith sign's perspective. The herder was in the form of a black smoke soul body. He was flying swiftly and swiftly. However, the black smoke that was hard to see with the naked eye was scattered and indeterminate. Elder Mo Luan's condition was a bit of a mess. He should have been injured. Luo Nan had done some research on Elder Mo Luan recently. He knew that Elder Mo Luan was a core power of the Blood Flame Order. He was a dual cultivator of spells and martial arts. At his peak, he was an existence that even extraordinaries would cast sidelong glances at. Elder Mo Luan was only 60 years old. He was only in the prime of his life. He should be at his peak. Unfortunately, he had suffered serious internal injuries during the split of the order. He had never been nimble, and it was even harder for him to break through the boundaries of extraordinaries. His bodily functions rapidly declined. In recent years he had relied more on spells to support himself. But even so he was able to suppress an elite of the society like old Mr. Bai. It was quite amazing. And if Elder Mo Luan was truly forced into a corner, Elder Mo Luan would ignite his life force and summon the blood flame will to descend. Elder Mo Luan's combat strength was extremely terrifying. Then came the question. Who could kill and injure this veteran B-rank power? It must be known that even He Yuan had borrowed the psychic wave network to invite President Ouyang to carry out a long-range attack. The result would have been the same. But if Elder Mo Luan was at the level of President Ouyang, how could the Wraith sign win in battle and devour him? Alright, what did it devour again? The structure of Luo Nan's god gear was gradually stabilizing, but it was affected by the impact. The water level of the vast iceberg sea rose explosively, and there was a marvelous sensation of a sudden rise in temperature. He observed for a moment and discovered that this was the result of the friction and conflict between two sources of power. Clearly, the thing it devoured this time wasn't another human-faced arachnid's avatar, but something else. The difference in nature is quite large. After forcefully devouring it, digesting it is quite strenuous. Luo Nan guessed in a circle, but he was unable to come to a conclusion. It must be known that the Wraith sign was intrinsically chaotic. It acted purely by instinct. It lived forever in the present. It had no concept of the past, the future, and it had no relevant memories. Luo Nan didn't know how to inspect the memories of his believers. Even if he knew, he wouldn't know where to start. He could only watch helplessly as Mo Luan and the Wraith sign secretly escaped into the distance. There was no other way. He could only give the Wraith sign a reminder. He would immediately shift his consciousness whenever a clear change occurred on the other side. Noon was extremely tight and precious for Luo Nan and Xuelei. Naturally, they politely declined the school hospital. The two ate lunch after activating the extravasated blood in Luo Nan's knee. Then it was time for afternoon classes. Luo Nan cultivated in addition to the eyes orifice. He also cultivated in the mouth and tongue orifice. He had to take care of his internal organs, so the time required was longer. After everything was done, he only had a short period of time to take a nap. He closed his eyes and opened them again. He had to go to class. It was hard not to feel a bit emotional. Well, it could also be said to be grumbling. Morning, afternoon, and evening classes. It's not easy to persevere through them. My time is divided into 3 parts by these 3 classes. Of course, it would be great if I could cultivate wholeheartedly, but a slight change would make it hard to satisfy both sides. That's why. Why is it that many martial arts seniors like to go into seclusion once they reach a certain level? It's because they want to avoid the interference of the outside world to the greatest extent. However, since we're cultivating in this world, we will be affected by the turbid currents of the human world. How can we always follow the prescribed order and be smooth sailing? Cough. You can't use these words as an excuse. Got it, senior brother. Luo Nan groaned. He stretched his back on the trolley and the bones, flesh and tendons of his entire body crackled. The endless turbulence and the rising temperature of the vast ocean of icebergs was a bit lacking in stability. But when it coupled with the body gear, the interference force formed was much more active. Luo Nan had his afternoon classes earlier, but he felt the heart lantern burn brightly. The spiritual pool was overflowing. It followed the rise and fall of his vital energy. It was like a stream of snow melting under the spring sun. It seemed warm yet cold, and it revolved around his internal organs. His tempering suddenly increased by 20 to 30%. It could be said that he had received some nourishment. This was a sign that the eyes orifice and the mouth and tongue orifice were resonating with each other. Luo Nan originally thought that he would need at least 10 days of effort. He never thought that there would be results in less than 3 days. It had to be said that this was closely related to the great supplement pill that the Wraith sign had forcefully swallowed. Xuelei, who was next to Luo Nan, nodded over and over as he listened to the signs that appeared on Luo Nan's body. You've really entered the threshold of fleshly body tempering. Let's practice Sans Ho this afternoon. Let's spar. Luo Nan shot a glance at Xuelei's arm that could reach his thigh. He didn't respond to Xuelei's words. He just asked, "Tonight, the large activity area, Frost River reality. You're going too?" Xuelei obviously wouldn't refuse. He even reminded Luo Nan, "Don't cause trouble. Leave early and go home." "Cause trouble?" Luo Nan shrugged. "It's done. Then I'll see you at gear. Let's practice Sans Ho first." Xuelei emphasized once more. I have a class today. Doesn't that just leave notes on the most important people of the world? New class. Luonan blinked his eyes. He reached out and grasped the air. Then he opened his palm. A bead of water appeared to be stuck to his palm, but it was actually suspended in midair, spinning and spinning. There were only 2 classes in the afternoon and they were related to writing. In any case, Luonan wasn't too interested in them. He didn't pay too much attention to the specifics. He just moved his finger slightly, letting the small bead of water revolve between his fingers. This bead of water was not the external neuron that had undergone a rebirth. It was condensed later. The condensation ring and the 5 auxiliary structures were complete. The bead of water swam across his fingertips like a blunt blade cutting across skin. It looked as if it could collapse at any time. This was not an illusion. If Luonan exerted a bit too much force with his fingers, it would be tantamount to placing a bomb on his fingertips. He would suffer. Luonan's control over his fleshly body was far from enough. If he practiced for too long, an accident would certainly occur. He completely relied on mental control. This was a relatively good training method. It was one of the daily cultivation techniques taught by Her Majesty Empress Wu in the intermediate training class in Xia City. But right now Luonan's mind wasn't completely focused on it. The Wraith sign had just sent a signal. After over an hour of tossing and turning, the unlucky elder Mo Luan had finally returned to his secret hideout. He was communicating with the others. This was a high-class member suite of a large fitness center. The interior of the room was decorated in a purplish-red color. The lighting was dim and it carried a bit of an exotic atmosphere. The room wasn't small, but there were only 2 wooden armchairs set up in the corner. Yoga mats were placed in most of the space. There was also a treadmill, a bicycle, an elliptical machine and other equipment. There was also a small hot spring in the corner. Elder Mo Luan's fleshly body was already here. He sat cross-legged in the hot spring naked. However, Mo Luan's soul had yet to return to his body. His injuries had yet to heal. Perhaps returning to his body would allow him to recover a bit faster, but it would make his body, which was already full of hidden injuries, even worse. Mo Luan could only endure for a while. Mo Luan's soul floated in the room and the Wraith sign was right next to him. There were 2 wooden armchairs in the room. One of them was empty, reserved for Mo Luan. Even if Mo Luan didn't sit, he still had to show respect. 6 core members of the order had already received the news and were gathered here. Luonan was able to recognize all of these people after a month of intermittent identification. Chapter 387. Mrs. Halder was a woman that left a deep impression on people. Luonan had the temperament of a homebody. He didn't really recognize people, but he never forgot her from the first time he met her. Yes, it must be admitted that Mrs. Halder's image was quite good. She was around 40 years old and she was in the gym room right now. She wore a deep purple knitted wool dress and stockings of the same color. She paired it with black velvet high heels. Her hair was tied up in a seemingly casual bun, and a few locks hung down the side of her forehead. She was elegant and concise, like a noble woman who had been in a high position for a long time. However, her somewhat westernized 3-dimensional silhouette, her deep eye sockets, her quiet and serene gaze, and the strange slender bloody scar on her right cheek gave her a tough and callous aura. Upon closer inspection, she looked more like a strong woman who had experienced many experiences. In the secular world, she was indeed a queen of the business world. The high-class fitness center they were in right now was one of her businesses. She had inherited her husband's Castle Financial Group, and it had rapidly expanded over the past 10 years. She controlled several well-known fashion and sports brands, and her influence in the field of entertainment and sports grew more and more astonishing. Luonan had once looked up information on Mrs. Halder. She was a legendary figure in Xia City. During the Dark Age, when the Blood Flame Order was internally divided, the reigning chief oblatum of the order cowered before the chaotic conflict of doctrines. This caused the order's sacrificial vessel to be destroyed, causing irreparable losses. In the moment of life and death, it was this Mrs. Halder who beheaded the previous oblatum, her husband. Furthermore, with his strong conviction, he had withstood the violent backlash of the blood flame will. Amidst the raging blood flame, he had inherited the position of officiant. He had also relied on the rapidly expanding financial resources of the secular world to stabilize the situation during the order's relatively weak stage, preserving this branch of the Blood Flame Order. The bizarre bloody scar on her right cheek was the mark of the ultimate trial of the Blood Flame will. It was the testimony of the soul-stirring events of the past. Due to her actions of beheading and killing her husband, she became known as the Black Widow of the Inner World. Her reputation was terrible, but within the Blood Flame Order her prestige was unparalleled. Practically everyone was awed by her unyielding and iron-blooded nature. Even a senior elder like Immortal was extremely respectful toward her. At this moment, aside from Madame Halder, who was seated on a chair, everyone else was standing. Vice First Ablatum Lu, who had once crossed paths with Luo Nan, leaned lightly on a treadmill beneath the floor-to-ceiling glass window of the wooden corridor outside. His body language was probably the calmest. She had started her career as Lady Halder's confidential secretary. Although she no longer held a position within the financial group, she was the person in charge of the Frost River reality project that the financial group had dispatched. In the secular world, her position was low, but she held great power. Within the Blood Flame Order, he was one of the successors that Madame Halder paid close attention to. Apart from Lu, the strong man standing respectfully to Lady Halder's right was also an important figure in the church. His name was Meng Chong, and he was one of Madame Halder's trusted aides. He had once been a security captain. Some unreliable reports said that he was Lady Halder's lover, but in reality, Meng Chong was the only one in the Blood Flame Order, apart from Lady Halder and Elder Mo, who had passed the final trial of the Blood Flame will. Logically speaking, his physique should be on the monstrous level, but he was extremely low-key. He never participated in any sort of ranking, so it was very hard to make an accurate judgment. As for the other three, there was an old man with a scholarly air. He was another elder of the order, Zhang Yuanzhen. He was a standard member of the primitive religious sect. He was over a dozen years older than Mo Luan, but he was more skilled in theoretical work. His qualifications in the order were a bit worse than Mo Luan's. Zhang Yuanzhen used to be an advisor type of character. Later, Lady Halder raised his position in the order. Although he was useless in terms of combat strength, it was precisely because of his and Mo Luan's existence that this faction of the order gained a more orthodox atmosphere in this era of the collapse of sacrificial artifacts and conflicts of laws and logos. Right now it was this old man who was the most anxious. He was not worried about the injured Mo Luan, but about the wraith sign that was a substitute sacrificial artifact. Of course, in the Blood Flame Order they called it the mold. How's the mold? Mo Luan, do you have any accurate information? How did you do it? Zhang Yuanzhen appeared to be very anxious and at a loss. He was a standard theorist. His own level of extraordinary power was only at the sea level. According to the observations and experiments of the order, under normal circumstances, the human-faced arachnid's clone would exist on the mental plane at the border of the abyss region and the polar domain. That was the special domain of extraordinaries or B-rank powerhouses who specialized in mental senses. Ordinary ability users were simply unable to sense it. It was only when hunting that the human-faced arachnid would approach the material world. In fact, strictly speaking, there was not a single person in the Blood Flame Order who fulfilled these two hard criteria. Lady Halder had gone through special channels to obtain the herding technique that could capture the human-faced arachnid's clone and forge it into a sacrificial artifact mold. Right now, only Lady Halder, Elder Mo Luan, Deputy Ablatums Lu, and Ren Hong could use this technique among the core members of the order. Only these four people could see it under normal circumstances. Mo Luan could not stand this old fellow. He was disinclined to respond. Lady Halder was deep in thought, so she had no obligation to respond. Lu was just about to respond when Ren Hong, who was close to Zhang Yuanzhen, spoke first. Old Jiang, the mold is very normal right now. It is currently digesting its food. The structure of the Blood Soul Temple has become more complete. The sound of blood and fire is very clear. Ren Hong's age was close to Lady Halder's. He was around 40 years old. His appearance was ordinary, but his words and actions were mature and appropriate. He normally did not reveal himself, but when he was preaching he was extremely inciting. He was the backbone of the order purely by relying on its business. Normally, he would discuss the theories and preaching methods of the order with Zhang Yuanzhen. Their relationship was relatively close. Zhang Yuanzhen did not have any misgivings towards Ren Hong. At his age he really was like a child. He grabbed Ren Hong like he was seizing a toy. He wished he could stomp his feet. Let me hear it. Let me hear it. Ren Hong glanced helplessly at Lady Halder. Lady Halder's eyelids drooped slightly. This could be considered as consent. Don't take too long. Ren Hong first warned Jiang Yuanzhen before grabbing Jiang Yuanzhen's wrist. He adjusted the frequency of the fluctuations of his soul strength, bringing Jiang Yuanzhen's soul strength inside. It was like an amplifier, allowing Jiang Yuanzhen to listen to the sound that came from the depths of the mental plane. Blood, blood, blood. Fire, fire, fire. The monotonous, manic and incessant sound was like a gradually rising platform that pressed down on the mental plane. Layer upon layer, there was no end to it. And because it was nothingness, it could collapse at any moment. After listening for a long time, one's internal organs would begin to convulse and contract. However, in Jiang Yuanzhen's ears, this sound was like the sound of nature. He laughed so hard that his eyebrows could not be seen. This is like eating a great tonic. The 2120 steps of the Bloody Soul Temple's path of blood fire now has 1755 steps. Ren Hong confirmed the number, then reminded him, time's up. How can it be so fast? Jiang Yuanzhen wanted to act shamelessly, but Ren Hong gently and firmly refused Jiang Yuanzhen's request and even pulled away. Jiang Yuanzhen wanted to toss and turn again, but Ren Hong gave him a meaningful glance, reminding him that the Lord Ablatum was right in front of him. Jiang Yuanzhen had been raised by Mrs. Halder, so he was afraid in his heart. His face twitched and he finally stopped pulling. He turned to face the master seat and smiled. Then he began to count with a deadpan expression. Last time Mo Luan reported the number of steps to be 1569. My goodness, this time it's 186 steps? Yin Lu reminded him from the side. Old Jiang, there was a successful hunt last week that didn't make the report. At that time it was already 1605 steps. A whole 150 steps is too much. Especially the blood flame path, which starts at the end of the 1600 steps. Even if it can't compare to the final 120 steps of the blood flame altar, it still isn't easy to construct. What in the world is this thing? So powerful. If Luo Nan hadn't used the Wraith sign to spy on the high-level communications of the blood flame order, he would certainly have been completely baffled. Actually, the so-called blood flame path was the quantitative standard of the blood soul temple structure that the blood flame order had implanted into the human-faced arachnid's avatar. It was divided into 6 levels. The first 400 steps were a stage and the last 120 steps were the final sublimation stage. Not only did it have numerical quantification, it also had an image. Right now, the hell-like structure that had been assimilated into the Wraith sign's body was piled up layer by layer from the center. It was like a mountain peak of cooled lava. The mountain path on top of the mountain twisted and turned. There were many pores in the mountain rocks and lava flowed and spat out. Could be described as a river of lava and a stream of fire. It could change the mountain's terrain and shape at any time. But no matter how it changed, there was a majestic and awe-inspiring building at every certain height on the mountain. It was either a palace hall or a cave. They were built next to the mountain as if they were one entity. This was the embryonic form of the Blood Soul Temple. Right now, 4 buildings had been formed, representing that 4 stages had been completed. The next 5th stage was the formation of the altar on the mountain peak. The final 6th stage was the 120 steps of the blood flame altar. Through the blood sacrifice, the blood flame was internalized into the entire mountain peak, thus forming the complete appearance of the Blood Soul Temple. Luo Nan lacked a deep understanding of secret orders, but he could tell from his senses that this entire process was a step-by-step process. It was quite standardized. Aside from hurting, there were endless sacrifices and refinements every day. They were mysterious and contained magical powers, reflecting the accumulation of the Blood Flame Order's laws and logos. As an internal member of the Blood Flame Order, she naturally did not view the problem as simply as Luo Nan. Jiang Yuanzhen had been worrying about the future construction of the Blood Soul Temple. The first 2,000 steps are fine. The 120 steps of blood sacrifice are the most difficult. Just based on the current scale of the order, it is a bit strenuous to perform sacrifices day and night. If we could have this kind of sacrifice. Ren Hong also agreed. That's right. The Order of Justice acted earlier than us. It is said that before En Weng's accident, The Order of Justice had already sent the human-faced arachnid to headquarters. In other words, no matter how we graze in Xia City, it will be hard to gather a complete human-faced arachnid. If we want the mold to be effective, it is hard to avoid seeking other methods. Right now, it looks like the mold's devouring ability still has room for expansion. This is a good thing. Lu was a bit more pessimistic. It's hard to make a judgment just by looking at an example. Jiang Yuanjun clapped her hands. You'll have to ask Luan about this. It was dangerous this time, but if we can really find a way to assist in the blood sacrifice, then it would truly be a boundless merit. Just as her voice fell, a mass of light and shadow unfurled in the center of the room. Luan did not participate in the conversation from start to finish. He just transformed the relevant memories into energy information that could be recognized by specialized equipment. Then he transformed it into an image, allowing the core members of the order to understand the situation at the time. This sort of ability to reproduce memories seemed simple, but in reality only those who had a deep understanding of the mind and the soul could do it. Luonan felt ashamed of his inferiority to Luan's deep and ruthless ability. As the light and shadow changed, it was tantamount to replaying Luan's experience at the time. Due to the nature of human thought, it was hard to avoid subconscious processing and distortions. However, it was enough to serve as a reference. Luonan found the scene of the incident familiar. He thought about it carefully and recognized that this was the recycling stratum of the Twin River district. This place was filled with gangs and negative emotions. It was indeed one of the best places for the human-faced arachnid to reside. Luan gave a brief introduction of the background. He used the mental plane to directly transmit telepathically. However, Luonan could hear everything clearly due to the mental connection between him and the Wraith sign. I was just doing my routine patrol at the time. Mold suddenly became very excited. I thought that it had discovered prey, so I immediately went over. But then I saw a bird. It wasn't a bird, right? Jiang Yuanjun relied on his age to speak more casually with Luan. Luan didn't bicker with him. He responded calmly, indeed. I only discovered that it wasn't a bird when I got closer. It was a wing-hand bloodbat. Wing-hand bloodbat. Actually, Luonan was already stupefied when he saw the image. Luan's explanation only gave him a confirmation. It really was a wing-hand bloodbat. Luonan had participated in the Trigate Security Conference last week. This was the first thing that was introduced. Luonan had the deepest impression of it. He knew that this thing possessed a highly contagious virus. It was a mutated type and it could even control biological aberrations. It possessed an extremely high level of threat. Among the rewards provided by Trigate Security, this thing's corresponding bonus was ranked at the top. It couldn't be this coincidental, right? Luonan found it a bit hard to accept this astonishing coincidence for a time. However, he found it even harder to imagine that such a dangerous aberration had other channels to enter and exit Xia City at any time. If this really was the case, then the world line would change into Resident Evil. If it really was the target that Trigate Security mentioned, then wouldn't there be any dregs left after the Wraith sign made his move? Trigate Security had said that the Wraith sign wanted to capture the wing-hand bloodbat alive and retrieve the corpse if it was dead. Well, it didn't matter if it was the Wraith sign or Luan's out-of-body state. They were just wandering around on the mental plane. Even if they killed the wing-hand bloodbat, they shouldn't have taken the corpse away. Luonan immediately became excited. He stared fixedly at the image of light and shadow. He wanted to find the surrounding landmark buildings and confirm the coordinates. However, as he carefully observed, Luonan felt that the image was a bit strange. He didn't know what was strange about it for a time. Jiang Yuanjun was also very shocked. It really is a wing-hand bloodbat? How did this thing enter the city? Even the city guards are blind. Oh, it seems a bit different. Luan answered, it really is different from the species found in the wilderness. Actually, I've always wondered if this thing can even be considered a wing-hand bloodbat. The image of light and shadow just happened to give them a close-up view. This time, whether it was the group of core members of the Blood Flame Order up close or Luonan, who was 2 or 3 city districts away, they all saw the problem. Chapter 388. Too tough. This was Jiang Yuanjun's evaluation. Could be said that she was right on the mark. This wing-hand bloodbat was a lot thinner than the image data Luonan had seen. Luo Nan still remembered the countless number of wing-hand blood bats fluttering under the setting sun in the information provided by Trigate Security. Though they weren't large in size, every single one of them was like a savage and powerful canine. Their 4 claws were sharp, their muscles were solid, and their fur was glossy and smooth. Their skin and bat wings were a bit dim, but they were powerful in their flaps. One look and one could tell that they weren't easy to mess with. However, the one Mo Luan encountered was a typical symptom of dysplasia. Its wingspan was at most 20 centimeters and it was shriveled and skinny. Only its eyes were blood red, giving it the feeling of extreme insanity. It wasn't even 11:30 in the morning at the time. It was the end of the day on the recycling stratum, the time when the visible light was the most. This wing-hand blood bat shuttled back and forth between the sunlight and the shadows. Its skin and bat wings let out a strange sound when they flapped. According to the information provided by Trigate Security, this wing-hand blood bat was an estrus. Of course, it was unable to find its own kind to satisfy it within the boundaries of Xia City. This made it all the more irritable. Perhaps it was this kind of emotion that attracted the human-faced arachnid to discover its target. The wraith sign immediately pounced over restlessly. Unfortunately, these 2 vicious creatures weren't dealing with the problem of estrus. They were engaged in a life-and-death battle. From the perspective of a normal person, they would at most see the bat shadow circling in the air. They wouldn't be able to see the deeper mysteries. However, the light and shadow displayed Mo Luan's memories of the time. The levels and details were far richer. This was the first time Luo Nan saw an ability user's memories of the mental plane. He couldn't take his eyes off it for a time. The conflict between the 2 sides erupted in an extremely direct manner. The wraith sign revealed a human face and an arachnid body. It had 6 eyes and 8 feet, and a chaotic and berserk mental attack radiated out. The wing-hand bloodbat's reaction was a bit slower, but its counterattack was extremely fierce. It didn't use its claws and other substantial weapons. Only its eyes deepened by a shade and a dazzling bloody mist soared from its body. Thousands of human faces could be vaguely seen as it soared. There were also strange demonic shadows interweaving, treacherous and savage. Such a situation greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. Therefore, even though Jiang Yuanjin knew that this was a scene reenactment, she still cried, "Ah!" from the gym. At this moment, Mo Luan's perspective was very close. It was clear that Mo Luan was also very surprised at that time and unconsciously moved closer to observe. The wraith sign showed its incredible fighting instinct. Facing the bloody smoke, it withdrew its explosive spiritual attack instantly, and the void outside its body was twisted. Perhaps it was because the bloody soul temple inside had gradually grown in scale, but it was already showing signs of interfering with the material world. At first glance, the momentum seemed to be slightly weaker, but in terms of endless depth, it was far superior. It was simply like a miniature black hole. The result of the collision between the 2 sides also proved this point. The blood smoke and cloud chi collided with the outer edge of the distorted void and involuntarily twisted. It lost its burning momentum and was trapped and swallowed up. In a breath's time there was not much left. As for the wraith sign, his demonic body instantly swelled in size. Luo Nan thought that this was the moment the wraith sign delivered the meteorite. At this point it could only be said that the devil sign had won. However, no one expected that the wraith bloodbat would lose most of its blood smoke and cloud chi. Instead, its viciousness was aroused. Its body that was as thin as a match suddenly expanded, becoming as round as a ball. It simply didn't give the wraith bloodbat a chance to react. It exploded with a bang and a bloody mist sprayed everywhere. The hearts of everyone watching the video trembled, including Luo Nan. In his eyes, it wasn't the wraith bloodbat that exploded. It was a million. It was this bloody mist that made even the rampaging wraith sign vigilant. He directly escaped into the depths of the mental plane, temporarily hiding. On the other hand, Mo Luan was too close. He was sprayed head-on by the remnants of the bloody mist. His field of view swayed in an instant and his energy became chaotic. The video ended there. So it turns out that we were caught in the crossfire. Jiang Yuanjin let out a breath, dispelling her nervous mood. There was a bit of mockery in her tone. However, she soon said in distress, "I was just thinking that if the wraith bloodbat was useful, we could go to the wilderness and kill around. It wouldn't be any worse than a blood sacrifice." But after watching for so long, it seems that something isn't right? It really wasn't right. Everyone present was a veteran ability user. They had gone to the wilderness at least a dozen or so times. The wraith blood bat wasn't some rare species. Everyone had encountered them before. However, they had never seen the wraith blood bat in Mo Luan's memories. The wraith blood bat used the blood mist as an attack method. Moreover, if something went wrong, the wraith blood bat would immediately self-destruct. Could even injure a veteran B-rank power. Are there any left behind? Mrs. Halder cut to the chase at this time. In an instant, the gym entered its most serious state. Mo Luan understood what Mrs. Halder meant. She was asking if there were any samples of the force of the impact that injured him. Generally speaking, this was a very difficult matter, but Mo Luan answered. There are. An extremely fine thread of blood, like a gossamer thread, appeared out of thin air as he spoke. Actually, it was sent out by Mo Luan's soul body to appear before everyone's eyes. When this thread of blood was sent out, it was only a millimeter in length. But its diameter was even thinner. It was like a broken spider silk. If it wasn't for the brilliance of the bloody light, people with old eyes like Jiang Yuanzhen wouldn't have been able to see it clearly. The nature of the thread of blood was extremely strange. It had only appeared in front of people for a few seconds, but it seemed to swell a bit and elongate a bit. Moreover, it twisted its head and swayed its tail like a living bug. Mo Luan spoke of the results of his observations during this time. For now, I am unable to define the mode of existence of this thing. It appeared within the blood of the wing-hand vampire bat, but now it exists on the mental plane. It endlessly devours and paralyzes soul bodies, rapidly growing stronger. He was still looking for an adjective when Mrs. Halder cut to the chase. A biological fission reproduction. A kind of mental microorganism or perhaps a virus. Jiang Yinzhen suddenly clapped his hands. A human-faced arachnid. Everyone understood what he meant. Yin Lu unconsciously stood up straight. It really is similar. Could it be a Darksider species? A species that we have never discovered before? A Darksider species? Luo Nan, who could be called the best listener, suddenly became interested. This thing was a Darksider species? If this really was the case, then it would be the second species that he had seen with his own eyes. Luo Nan had studied the human-faced arachnid in detail during this period of time, but it didn't yield any results. The Darksider species or Darksider life form was a new concept in and of itself. It hadn't even been 2 years since it was proposed. A complete system had yet to be formed, and the amount of information was pitifully small. Luo Nan suspected that with his understanding of the human-faced arachnid, he could list a few phenomena and write a paper. He would receive treatment from a top journal, and he would earn so many honor points within the society that his hands would go limp. Therefore he still had to rely on himself for everything. Luo Nan discovered that this blood virus was quite different from the human-faced arachnid through his observations. It was just as Mo Luan said. This thing's stance was quite ambiguous. It switched back and forth between the material plane and the mental plane. Essentially speaking, this was because its living environment was at the juncture between the mental and the material plane. It was an amphibious species. From the results of his current observations, the roots of its growth and strength were all on the mental plane. It didn't have the ability to absorb nutrients from the material world. However, it was unable to dive deeper into the mental plane. According to the conventional division of the inner world of 3 zones, 1 region and 1 domain, this thing could only move about in the topmost layer of the shallow zone. It was like a mosquito larva on the surface of the water. But if it continued to split and reproduce, then it would be hard to say. After all, it could injure Mo Luan, but it couldn't rely on its current abilities. Luo Nan could sense that the wraith sign, who had been resting idly in the depths of the mental plane after Mo Luan released the blood virus, aroused its instinctive attention. But perhaps it saw that this thing was too weak. It wasn't enough to fill the gaps between its teeth, so it lost interest. Perhaps it wanted to raise it? While Luo Nan was researching, the others weren't idle either. It's also a parasitic species? Ren Hong tried to make a judgment. So to speak, that wing-hand vampire bat is actually a victim host? Is this parasitic relationship a designated one, or is it an arbitrary choice? Perhaps he just wanted to express his thoughts, but the meaning behind his words was like a cold wind that blew the atmosphere in the room cold. With the complexity of mutants and the pitiful depth of human research, it wasn't strange to suddenly discover a new species, especially the Darksider species that came and went without a trace. However, the situation of being parasitized still made people feel unhappy. In the research of mutants, parasitic and symbiotic relationships were actually quite common. During the craziest mutant era, large quantities of insects and microbes on Earth suffered from warped mutations. They evolved into similar abilities, bringing about an extremely terrifying chaos. There were often people who said that the ability users that appeared in the new era were products of a kind of parasitic and symbiotic relationship. They were mutations caused by special viruses entering the host cells. But it was very hard for people to accept this theory. As humans who possessed high levels of intelligence, they instinctively loathed this sort of image that threatened their self-awareness. 9 out of 10 Darksider species are parasitic. There's no need to say too much. Lady Halder ignored her own instincts with her powerful willpower. She focused her gaze on the swimming blood virus before her eyes. After observing it seriously for a period of time, she spoke softly. It uses the blood essence of the fleshly body to drive a viral fission on the mental plane. This sort of interference method seems berserk, but it's actually precise and mysterious. Is it that hard to get rid of? For me, it would take a few days. It shouldn't be hard if I'm careful, but if I increase the number of samples, then I'll need to observe it. How's the scene? I've already arranged for people to protect it. But due to its nature, I haven't begun to collect samples for now. Come with me again. Yes. No one else had the leeway to interrupt the conversation between the two core figures of the order. Only when the principles for handling the matter were decided did Lady Halder change the topic. With Mo Luan's condition, it won't be suitable for him to continue herding for a period of time in the future. We need to adjust the candidates. Everyone discussed this. Everyone's expressions were solemn. What Lady Halder said was a very realistic matter. The founding ceremony of the Blood Flame Order was on December 21st. There were only 40 days left until today. The mold for the Blood Soul Temple had just reached the 5th stage. The progress was smooth, but it could not be interrupted no matter what. In reality, as the human-faced arachnid incident receded and the hunting operation continued, it became more and more difficult to search for the human-faced arachnid's clone in Xia City. The slightest bit of slack could bring irreparable negative effects to the reconstruction of the sacrificial artifact. The reason why Lady Halder was interested in the parasite on the body of the wing-hand bloodbat was because she saw a possible alternative plan. But before she could confirm the feasibility of this plan, she still had to complete the most basic of tasks. Jiang Yuanzhen coughed. Relying on his age, he opened his mouth and listed out the matters that didn't have much significance, but they still had to be considered. The herding law, in our hands, has already appointed 4 shepherds. Aside from Mo Luan, there are the Lord Ablatum and 2 Deputy Ablatums. There are 3 candidates, but considering that the Lord Ablatum needs to prepare for the sacrificial ceremony and coordinate with the Blood Flame Will every day, it is hard for him to split his time. So there are only 2 candidates, Yin Lu and Ren Hong. Which one do you choose? Lady Halder asked directly. Ren Hong. Jiang Yuanzhen's response was very decisive. She even gave Yin Lu a glare. Yin Lu is running around outside every day. She's tied up with mundane matters. How could she have the time to herd? Yin Lu smiled bitterly and lowered her head. She didn't want to argue with this old man. According to Jiang Yuanzhen's thoughts, as a deputy ablatum, she should devote her entire body and mind to teaching affairs. As for the business matters, there would naturally be professionals to handle them. For this reason, the old man gave Yin Lu quite a bit of face. Ren Hong. Lady Halder seemed to be muttering to herself, but she also seemed to be asking. Ren Hong was a bit unsure of her intentions, but he still lowered his head and said, I am willing to temporarily take over the matter of herding. I will listen to the Ablatum's arrangements. Lady Halder declined to comment. She continued to call out names. Meng Chong. Meng Chong responded bluntly, I'm not good at it. I have no objections. Yin Lu? Yin Lu was the person involved. She could only say, I will listen to the boss's instructions. She continued her habits from her days as a confidential secretary. She didn't refer to the Lord Ablatum as the boss. Lady Halder's gaze swept across everyone in the room. In the end, her gaze stopped on the face of the person who had been silent all this time. Wu Kuei. Wu Kuei was an ordinary man who could be drowned in the crowd at any time. His stature was short and stout and he had no sense of existence at all. Luonan had observed him for a long time, but Luonan still didn't know what Wu Kuei did. Luonan didn't know what Wu Kuei relied on to rise to the core of the Blood Flame Order. Wu Kuei's words weren't unique either. Let the Ablatum make the decision. This wasn't the first time Luonan had seen this sort of situation. Right now, Lady Halder's words were practically the law of the Blood Flame Order. Aside from Jiang Yuanzhen, who purely researched theory and didn't have any schemes, always relying on his seniority to say a few words, the others generally didn't have their own opinions. Mo Luan suddenly butted in at this time. I feel that something isn't quite right. The matter of coordinating the will of the blood flame is something that not only you but also Ren Hong. Right now he's the main force of preaching. The 40th anniversary ceremony of the establishment of the order is just around the corner. He has to participate in a series of warm-up ceremonies. This is unavoidable. Jiang Yuanzhen retorted, in the end he isn't the Ablatum. Squeezing out a bit of time should be fine. The problem is that the Blood Soul Temple has already established a connection with the outside world after entering the 5th phase. They are more sensitive to psychic wave interference. Which of the recent ceremonies hasn't had powerful psychic waves? They also need to mobilize the will of the blood flame. All of these things may affect the structure and growth of the Blood Soul Temple. Even if it's hard to judge whether it's positive or negative, do we really need to take this risk before the blood sacrifice? Jiang Yuanzhen's expression changed slightly when she heard this. She immediately changed her words. We have to be on guard. Lady Halder nodded slightly. Then it's Yinlu. A bunch of words were said, but in the end, it was Lady Halder who made the final decision. Mo Luan would always provide the best reason for her to speak. These were the rules of discussion of the Blood Flame Order. Lady Halder's gaze turned to Yinlu. December 21st is the ceremony of the establishment of the order. Nothing can go wrong. For the next few days, hand over the affairs in your hands that can be handed over. Don't think too much. I will send Meng Chong to follow you. You must ensure that nothing goes wrong. Chapter 389. The matter with the Blood Flame Order came to an end, but Luonan could not help feeling a bit vexed. It was getting harder and harder for him to dismount. It could be seen that the core members of the Blood Flame Order were extremely determined. They were all aiming to reconstruct the sacrificial vessel during the establishment ceremony. However, due to a freak combination of factors, the Wraith sign had replaced their original mold. This was an irreversible process. If he took back the Wraith talisman now, the Blood Flame Order would become a great enemy, and they would not rest until one of them was dead. However, if he dragged it on, it would only be a temporary peace. He would have to take it back sooner or later, and the longer he dragged it on, the more headache he would have. Unless he gave up the Wraith sign, but how was that possible? Luonan tossed this vexing problem to the back of his mind for the time being. He thought about how Mrs. Halder was going to investigate the scene. He wanted to go as well. Even if the 1 million had already exploded, as long as he could find some clues, it would still be helpful for the investigation later. Luonan did his best to recall the video data, searching for the relevant area. Thanks to the powerful network search function of the information age and the consciousness search function of the Hexier, even if it was just an impression, he would soon get the answer. He still felt that it wasn't enough, so he used his authority to use the real-time Street View mode on the psychic wave network to adjust the public cameras and confirm it again. The order of the recycling stratum was terrible. Most of the relevant cameras had been destroyed, but Luonan spent a bit of time piecing together the images. He was able to find the area where the incident most likely occurred, and he discovered a glaring pool of blood there. At this moment, there were people taking pictures in the surroundings, all of them very carefully. This is the place. According to what Mo Luan said, he had already arranged for people to deal with the scene. That was why it was said that this kind of old man was the most annoying. Luonan wanted to eat the first bite of soup, but he was afraid that it would be too much. Glancing at his watch, the first class was about to end. After class, he would find a quiet place and enter an out-of-body state. It would only take him a minute or two to reach the River Wu district. Luonan's plan was quite good and the preliminary work was quite in place. But the true big boss was unwilling to cooperate. On the podium, the cultured lecturer of the writing class said, "Let's not end the class. For the rest of the time, let's practice in class. It's a very basic character logic." "Teacher, I want to leave my body." Luo Nan had to kneel when faced with the reality that he had to attend writing classes in a row and that there would be tests. Even if he wanted to sleep on the table, he couldn't. What to do? Given Madame Halder's shrewdness, there wouldn't be anything left of her once she arrived at the scene. Luo Nan's mind was in a mess, but the teacher didn't care about him. She directly threw out the requirements for writing practice. The goal of the practice was character logic. There were a series of requirements. The student had to make sure that the words they wrote corresponded with each other. The initial requirement was simple. Describe an impressive person. Make sure you know the person well. Family, friends, and classmates were all fine. He could start with a description of their appearance. Of course, this involved a series of details such as the shape of the face, mouth, nose, eyes, eyebrows, beard, and so on. The Luo Nan of 2 months ago might have had a narrow range of choices, but it was much easier now. He had chosen Xuelei, whom he had interacted with the longest. Yes, Xuelei was closer to the understanding of normal people. Xuelei was his target. The writing teacher must have a prying eye. Following that, there was a series of information such as address, health, family, education, love, marriage, history, religious orientation, actions, and thought patterns. Finally, the interaction with the target should also be listed, such as specific instances of helping or sabotaging each other's actions. There was a commotion in the classroom. Did this mean that their friendship was over? Luo Nan wrote in a very relaxed manner. It was like a sketch pieced together from words. This was his advantage. At most, he only needed to consider the content that exceeded normal thinking and logic. Perhaps Luo Nan was affected by this relaxed state, but the key points in his mind suddenly opened. As he wrote and wrote, his train of thought flew away from Xuelei. It was just like what his teacher had always tried to express. Characters were a collection of social relationships. A single person's ability was limited. The help of friends and social cooperation were the only ways to increase efficiency. Why did he have to think of such an inefficient method like skipping class? His train of thought was clear. His writing might not be divine, but he knew what to do next. A strand of his mind was thrown out, and ink responded dozens of kilometers away. Luo Nan didn't have the time to pay attention to the progress of Trigate Security's operation over the past 2 days. He just divided a bit of his mind to ensure that ink was obedient. Actually, the official search mission had already begun on Sunday. Right now it was the free time for professionals. Peony and Long 7 had split up to lead a group of people to collect clues. They would summarize and analyze the clues every day, but there had been no progress so far. In other words, luck was very important. Luo Nan activated the telepathic thought he left on Ink's body, and his consciousness descended. Ink was already used to this. It flapped its wings twice, expressing its welcome. Luo Nan's consciousness had just arrived, and he had yet to do proper business when he first felt a bit of peculiarity. Since Ink had a relatively low level of intelligence, Luo Nan's telepathic thought descended without any pressure. He didn't need to worry about anything. He had the most connections, and the corresponding feeling was the most familiar. Because of this, he immediately felt that something was different when his telepathic thought moved. It was like listening to a familiar song. The singer was the same, but there was a clear difference between the live version and the studio version. It looked like the effects of his 2-day closed-door training over the weekend were greater than he had imagined. Speaking of which, Luo Nan had gone from the fundamental format pyramid to the structure of the living starry sky with clairvoyance. From his internal organs, 9 orifices, and 6 roots to the state of his soul body, all of them had undergone relatively significant changes. This sort of change was all-encompassing. The resulting effects involved the structure of Luo Nan's body and soul, as well as all aspects of his internal and external connections. But because the effects were too broad, many things could only be experienced after actual contact. For example, Ink. After the format pyramid transformed into a star atlas, the connection between Luo Nan and his believers was no longer shackled by materialization. In fact, Luo Nan had become much clearer on an intrinsic level. He discovered at this moment that his observations on the mental plane had already taken on the mode of a telescope due to the effects of the atrium cyclotron 2 days ago. Through warping and weaving mental curtains, Luo Nan could obtain high-definition information from afar using a special format. This was the most crucial reason for the substantial increase in his mental sensing ability in recent times. Before, Luo Nan had only considered the changes brought to him by the telescope mode. Now he saw that ink had become an important fulcrum and reference in this mode. It was like a Cepheid variable star in the universe. Astronomers borrowed its light cycle to modify parameters and measure interstellar distances with greater precision. But from Luo Nan's perspective, every detail seemed to have exceeded his requirements for precision after being modified by ink. So much so that he only had a vague feeling that he was unable to accurately describe it. What sort of reasoning was this? Ink became a bit excited due to the existence of Luo Nan's telepathic thought. But no one else could understand its mood. Peony and the others were on the platform of a tall building in the Forest Wall district right now. They were using viewing binoculars to scan the city district. Ink stood on the binoculars, its claws digging into the outer shell. It was fine if it didn't move, but once it moved, it caused the lens to shake greatly. It was very hard to observe. Peony didn't even raise her head. She continued to use the binoculars to look around, but her slender fingers accurately found the target. She lightly flicked Ink's thick beak. "Mr. Ink, do you have any thoughts?" It carried a bit of childishness, but it also seemed to be teasing. In the classroom, Luo Nan subconsciously rubbed his mouth. He finally recovered from the changes in his ultra-precise perception. He connected the rubber band on Ink's ankle to communicate with Peony. He didn't really know how to deal with this woman, so he simply spoke his coordinates. "Go here." Peony stopped adjusting the binoculars' direction. She straightened her body and focused her gaze on Ink. She raised her eyebrows slightly, and a rarely seen expression of astonishment appeared on her face. Then she communicated with her soul strength. "You've discovered something? Are you sure? Where's the source of the information?" How could Luo Nan tell her? He couldn't find any other reason, so he simply shut his mouth and didn't answer. He wanted to say, "Do as you see fit," but he was afraid that Peony would retort back, so he simply had Ink close its eyes and pretend to be confused. Only after doing all of this did he come to a realization. Peony knew that there was someone behind Ink. "Close your eyes, my ass." Luo Nan was greatly embarrassed. There was no need to mention how to remedy the situation. However, Peony didn't get angry. She snapped her fingers and spoke to the support personnel of Trigate Security beside her. "We're going to change the location." "Oh, the effects are great." This was probably the fabled version of "do as you see fit." Ink still had the appearance of pretending to be asleep. Actually, he had completely absorbed the changes in the outside world and transmitted it back. Luo Nan's mind exploded with joy when he saw that an elite character like Peony, who was hard to grasp, was going to act according to his thoughts. Then he suddenly recalled that there were still people from the Blood Flame Order there. Soon Haldev and Mo Lun would arrive as well. He wanted to warn Luo Nan, but if he did this, his previous act would immediately collapse. After a moment of hesitation, Luo Nan found a reason for himself. Let Trigate Security make contact with the Blood Flame Order. Maybe they can get more information? Oh, this idea isn't bad. The work efficiency of Trigate Security was quite high. When they heard Peony say that they had a clue, they immediately dispatched a low-altitude aircraft. They only used 12 minutes to complete the transfer. When Peony and the group of support personnel arrived at the target location Luo Nan mentioned, they arrived a bit faster than Mrs. Haldev and the others who were quite far away. Mrs. Haldev didn't move forward after seeing Peony and the others arrive. She just let the on-site management personnel of the order negotiate with Trigate Security. As for how Luo Nan knew, the Wraith sign wasn't involved in this. That fellow had already changed his breeder, and was currently recuperating at the headquarters of the Blood Flame Order. Luo Nan relied on Ink. Ink flapped its wings and flew up, circling within the shadows of the tall building. Behind the tightly sealed doors and windows, pairs of eyes stared at this enormous bird. They were either excited or terrified. Luo Nan himself didn't know that this crow was a celebrity in the recycling stratum of the River Wu district. News of the great battle with Jack a month ago had spread through the ubiquitous criminal channels of this place. The residents who lived here more or less knew that a powerful and mysterious power had crushed the Jack Mafia that originally occupied this place. The main force of the mysterious power was a burly man. This was too lacking in uniqueness, So people took the initiative to choose a more legendary symbol, a large crow. The mysterious power had the special ability to control crows. Every time a crow's cry was heard, a calamity would descend, causing one's mind to go insane and fall unconscious. Jack Mafia's well-equipped sniper squad was easily defeated in this way. In the end, the mysterious power didn't take control of the recycling stratum. The territory of the Jack Mafia was divided among other powers, large and small. However, due to the free and unrestrained behavior of the mysterious power, the surrounding residents who had been tossed and turned by the gangs for a long time, unconsciously felt a bit of reliance on the mysterious power. Perhaps the mysterious power taking control of the recycling stratum would bring about a completely different and new life? Driven by such emotions, the reappearance of the enormous crow caused a considerable portion of the residents of the recycling stratum to feel a surge of emotion. It also caused a large number of gang members, who had gathered here due to the unknown value of the scene of the incident, to tremble with fear. Luo Nan didn't understand the cause and effect, but he could feel the actual psychological effect that Ink's appearance brought to the surrounding people. If the mental state of the surrounding people could be said to be a sprinkling of magnetic sand before, then Ink, who was shuttling back and forth between the shadows of the tall buildings, was like a powerful magnet. No matter where the magnetic sand was scattered, it would stand erect, aiming the magnetic poles of the opposite direction at Ink's location. From the perspective of the living starry sky, hundreds and thousands of stars were affected by the gravitational pull of Ink's constellation. They moved in unison, incomparably uniform. At the same time, the stars that weren't affected by the magnetic force were especially eye-catching. A considerable portion of them had a corresponding uniform displacement pattern. It was just that they were incompatible with the system Luo Nan had set up. The source of some patterns could be seen with a single glance. For example, the people of Trigate Security obeyed Peony's orders and obeyed the arrangements of their superiors. They were like galaxies revolving around a binary star system. There were also some patterns that couldn't be seen. For example, the on-site personnel of the Blood Flame Order didn't even know where the big shots of the Order were. But they were members of the Blood Flame Order in the end. Their long years of activity in the Order caused an extremely subtle connection to exist between their energies and the Blood Flame Will and the First Ablatum. In the living starry sky with Luo Nan's self-format as the core and the clear order, these connections were like pedestrians that violated the traffic rules and randomly entered the flow of traffic. They brought about chaos of varying sizes, but they were clearly distinguishable. Even though the distance spanned by the connections exceeded the limits of Ink's perception and exceeded the range of the living starry sky. But when all the intruders walked in the same direction, all the connections converged in a relatively fixed region. Luo Nan was naturally able to guess. There was a dark star there that was hard to see with the naked eye. It was releasing an invisible and powerful gravitational pull. Ink circled around twice before quietly expanding its flight trajectory outward. It gradually brought the possible locations of the dark star into the range of Ink's senses. A dozen or so seconds later, a dark nebula that was hard to pry into appeared within the living starry sky. Chapter 390. So mental senses could be used in this way? Luo Nan's train of thought opened up. The clairvoyance mode of the telescope was clearly a sort of systematic clairvoyance. Every believer, including Ink, was a node. They provided perceptual planes and details that could be mutually referenced and supplemented. Although the number of details might not be perfect, they reflected each other. According to the framework of formatting theory, they formed a relatively closed system that covered more and more layers. In this way, all existences that were not part of the system became especially prominent. No matter how minute the reverse arteries and veins were, they would be magnified, making his senses exceptionally sharp. There was no one else like this method in terms of early warning function. Mrs. Halder certainly saw Ink. Perhaps she knew that this crow was extraordinary, but she absolutely could not imagine that there was another person who was several dozen kilometers away, using this crow to observe her. There was another person at the scene who was very sensitive. It was Peony. She must have sensed Ink's abnormal flight trajectory. She raised her head to look. It was unknown how she judged it, but her gaze soon pointed toward the skyscraper where Mrs. Halder was, as well as the relevant floors. From Luo Nan's angle, he felt that there seemed to be a confrontation of gazes between Peony and Mrs. Halder. It was hard for Luo Nan to judge whether or not Peony saw Mrs. Halder, but Mrs. Halder's gaze was certainly locked onto Peony. "Well, you're the scapegoat." Luo Nan felt the secret delight of successfully shifting the blame after getting into trouble. He also felt a corresponding sense of accomplishment. This was the first time in his entire life. He wasn't worried about Peony's safety. After all, the most powerful woman in Xia City stood behind her. Mrs. Halder's Blood Flame Order and the Castle Financial Group were admittedly powerful forces in Xia City, but they were still lacking in comparison to Her Majesty Empress Wu. Peony, the person in question, didn't seem to care too much. Or perhaps it could be said that she didn't have the corresponding sense of crisis. She received a call at this time, and the smile on her face grew even more radiant. Her curved eyes seemed to flow with colorful light. Be it the Trigate security personnel beside her or the Blood Flame Order personnel, they all couldn't help but steal glances at her. It was hard to avoid their emotions from rising and falling. The living starry sky had a reaction. "Darling, have you arrived yet? How's my setup?" One fatal strike. Peony completely disregarded this. Her mind had already withdrawn from the mission. She allowed her mood to melt into her smile and flow naturally. "As long as you're happy, it's fine. No problem. Tonight, everyone's going to turn the heavens high and celebrate your success." He should be her boyfriend. But what's with that doting expression? After the writing class, it was time for the society's activities. Luo Nan was liberated. He was still thinking about the confrontation, entanglement, and communication at the recycling stratum of Shuanghe district. Many pieces of information would not have appeared at the time, or perhaps Luo Nan would not have been able to see them even if they had appeared. However, he was certain that both the Blood Flame Order and Trigate Security would hold a meeting to discuss the situation after he returned. It shouldn't be a problem for him to piece together a rough picture of the truth. Seiji had all the benefits, yet he remained uninvolved. It was a bit like a villain, but it did make Seiji feel great. At a time like this, it was none of his business whether others were in a good mood or not. Luo Nan waited for his car at the parking spot. His mind was pondering over the problem of system perception. It was just as he had understood before. He discovered an excellent early warning method. Though it was still lacking in many ways, it didn't seem difficult to make up for it. All he needed to do was expand the number of believers a bit and scatter them across the various city districts. They would connect seamlessly with each other, forming a closed system. Targets that were not part of the system, especially ability users who possessed self-logic, would be more or less accurate. What security and bodyguards did he need back then? Even the Skynet system that covered the entire city wouldn't be as sharp as he was. Even if the Order of Justice's first oblatum Deputy Secretary General Gong Qi and other powerful people came to kill them, Luo Nan would be able to know their positions and coordinates the moment they stepped into the boundaries of Xia City. They would be hundreds of kilometers away, and Luo Nan would be able to notify President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu to take to the skies to intercept them. Just thinking about it was exciting. As for expanding the number of believers, Luo Nan scratched his head. The streetcar just so happened to arrive. He boarded the car and continued to scratch. He felt a bit subtle. Luo Nan was certain that he had never truly regarded himself as a god. He had only seen bamboo poles paper. He had borrowed the relationship between believers and gods to describe the various mysteries of formatting theory. That was all there was to it. Therefore, Luo Nan wasn't like the contemporary secret orders. He didn't deliberately ponder over the so-called doctrines and rituals. Then he used all sorts of methods to actively expand the scale of his believers. So far he had accepted believers like ink in the Wraith sign. He didn't care about Rui Wen, who was a special example that appeared and disappeared from time to time. His true human believers numbered no more than 3 people. Bai's Xie Junping and Cat Eyes. Black Tiger Bai's was someone who relied on force to survive. His personality and conduct had been polished by the Order of Justice for a long time. He could be said to be plugged in and out. There was no adjustment period. Xie Junping wasn't a person of the same circle. He was muddle-headed and completely unaware. Luo Nan deliberately played down this relationship and forgot about it. He just left it there and let Xie Junping do what he wanted. As for Cat Eyes, she was probably the only example of a believer that possessed self-awareness and self-awareness. And the entire process couldn't be said to be smooth. Cat Eyes certainly had to bear the responsibility for this matter. But even if she had courted death herself, the series of developments that followed, especially the mental and willpower torment, made Luo Nan, the beneficiary, feel quite upset in his heart. This was especially true after the format pyramid transformed into a star atlas. The materialized chains disappeared and a more essential connection became prominent. Luo Nan inspected his believers one by one and discovered that Cat Eyes was acting extremely dispirited. Her mental state was worrying. This was absolutely not a situation Luo Nan wished to see. Luo Nan sat in the last row of the trolley, his fingers rubbing against his hair. As he pondered, his thoughts unconsciously shifted through the living starry sky. He saw Cat Eyes once more. It was the middle of the afternoon. Normal people worked and studied. Ability users cultivated and completed missions. But what about Cat Eyes? She was sitting cross-legged on the floor of the room. Her hair was messy and she wore a sleeveless top and briefs. Large swaths of healthy, smooth, light brown skin were exposed. She looked like she had just woken up from a hangover. Her fingers were unconsciously playing with a wine bottle. There were at least a dozen wine bottles around her body. Most of them were empty and overturned. They were a complete mess. Holy crap. If this continued, she would really be crippled. Luo Nan felt that this was no good. He was impulsive for a moment, so he simply said, "How about we have a chat?" Cat Eyes' figure froze the moment the thought came out. Her boring and monotonous actions came to an end. The wine bottle beside her feet rolled far away. Luo Nan only remembered when he saw the statue-like figure. He had not used the Hexier's channel at all. Instead, he had used his thoughts to directly enter. It was needless to say that this sort of method was one of the greatest taboos between ability users, especially mental ability users. From Cat Eyes' perspective, this was undoubtedly another stab in her bloody wound. Luo Nan was embarrassed. He didn't even think about whether or not he should apologize. But then he saw Cat Eyes reveal a strange smile for some reason. She supported her forehead with her hand, pressing against her hairline. She gathered her fluffy hair a bit, and her appearance was a bit similar to Luo Nan's. It was just that she exuded a serious feeling of decadence and a bit of self-mockery. "Okay, but I still have to go teach dancing in a bit. Boss, do you want me to skip work?" No need. The class ends at 8 in the evening. No problem. Only after Luo Nan spoke did he remember that he still had a social engagement tonight. He could completely have Cat Eyes come back tomorrow. But the words had already been spoken. Changing them now would be too passive. He might as well just stick together. Then come to Frost River Reality at Cloud City Water Village. I'll be waiting here. I'll be there at 8:30. The conversation ended here. The conversation between the two did not use any electronic devices. It was purely a telepathic exchange. It was smooth and natural, as if they had done this countless times. Cat Eyes looked as if she had just finished a routine phone call. Her face was apathetic. She picked up a full wine bottle beside her and skillfully opened the cap with her fingers. She blew too hard and the yellowish liquid of the wine overflowed from the corner of her lips. It flowed along her chin, neck, collarbone, all the way to her bulging chest. It seeped into a deep cleavage that could make any man stare blankly. Her camisole was drenched. The contours of her body and the corresponding details were all revealed down to the finest hair. That scene. Luo Nan's face turned red. He hurriedly cut off his telepathic thoughts. He unconsciously increased the strength of his fingers that brushed past his hair, scratching his scalp until it hurt. Only now did he truly come back to his senses. He really called that sister over. What was he going to talk about? Was he going to talk about taking her in as a believer? "I'm very sorry, but I haven't figured out the unfollow function yet. Why don't you wait a bit? Or should I say, girl, since you're already like this, you should obediently listen to me in the future. Warm my bed, make my quilts, dance for my amusement, and serve me well. I'll guarantee you glory, splendor, wealth, and endless benefits in the future." Then he was too impulsive. Luo Nan held his head, dispelling these senseless and foolish thoughts. He faced the roof of the trolley and silently grinned. He didn't know how to evaluate himself. The Hexier vibrated while he was in a dilemma. Someone from the society was calling. Could it be that Cat Eyes wanted to go back on her word and not come tonight? Luo Nan, this coward, was already looking forward to it. However, the caller was not Cat Eyes. It was Paper Cut. "Answer, I'm here. You're ringing and banging here. You haven't finished fiddling with it yet? Huh. Brother Papercut, where are you? I'll be right there. Only now did Luonan remember that he had already made an appointment yesterday. What was it? Luonan only remembered that it was a combat machine used by the control class. It was because he had asked Papercut for his so-called big move. He had been misunderstood as needing defensive measures, and Papercut had taken the initiative to deliver it to him. Frankly speaking, Luonan wasn't too interested in combat machines in the past. Now that he had the dripping sword, there was no need to even mention it. However, Papercut had come over. Luonan took the opportunity to express his gratitude and exchange their experiences with the dripping sword and the activation class. Luonan and Papercut chatted for a bit before another call came in. This time it was Shuelei. Nanster, you're done with class. I'll be at gear soon. I'm going to stretch my muscles a bit first. Oh my, thank you, Brother Papercut. Luonan heard that Shuelei wanted to rely on Sanzhou training, so he secretly cried out for Papercut's blessing. He hurriedly cut off Shuelei's words. Brother Papercut just arrived. He brought a combat machine. I heard it's quite interesting. Let's go take a look together and test out its power. Shuelei was a bit stunned by Luonan's words. Brother Papercut is teaching you a new lesson? He had taken Luonan's words seriously. Luonan gave a chuckle and vaguely brushed it off. To put it bluntly, he was really not interested in close combat. On one hand, he felt that he probably wasn't cut out for it. On the other hand, he was far too busy with his homework right now. From the inside to the outside, from the fleshly body to the soul, from the self to the believers, from gear to the clouds. He wished he could split a minute in half. He really didn't have the energy to open another lesson. He could only let Shuelei down for the time being. Luonan arrived before Shuelei. When he arrived at gear, he saw Papercut strolling around the front hall with his hands behind his back, watching how the construction workers operated. He looked like a supervisor at first glance, but that chubby face of his didn't seem dignified at all. Brother Papercut. Luonan greeted him and went forward. Let's go to the bar counter in the passageway at the bottom of the lake. The work on the surface isn't done yet, so it's a bit messy. It should be a lot quieter underground. It's fine. Let's go back and try it out. It's better to be a bit more spacious. Papercut waved his hand. He deliberately revealed his left wrist to attract Luonan's gaze. Luonan saw a black wrist guard wrapped around Papercut's white and plump wrist. It was quite eye-catching. Papercut even intentionally stretched it a few times. It seemed that the material was more flexible and tough, but Luonan couldn't see anything else. This is the flywheel arm. Oh, this is. Luonan finally remembered. The combat machine that Papercut said he was going to bring yesterday was called this. It sounded like a metal prosthetic at first glance, but Luonan never expected it to be like a wrist guard. It could be bent and bent as it pleased. Flexible metal material. The metal composition isn't high. After all, the vast majority of metal materials aren't suitable for soul strength interference and control. The ratio needs to be very particular. Papercut took off the flywheel arm and handed it to Luonan. Try it and you'll know. This thing is quite light and portable. Oh, I've sent over the instruction manual. There's even an instruction manual. Of course, there's an after-sales service as well. Papercut chuckled as he helped Luonan put it on. He taught Luonan the basics of how to use it. Luonan put this thing on and felt that it was different from a normal sports wrist guard. Aside from the material, it was a bit thicker. The feeling of fixing the wrist was quite obvious. Luckily, it used memory material. Luonan just needed to bend his wrist a few times to be able to wear it comfortably. Whether it was comfortable or not was not a key indicator for a combat machine. Even Papercut said, "It's light and portable. It's easy to use. You don't even need to be taught. You can learn it with a glance. As for speed, lethality and so on, they're all average. It's quite interesting to treat it as a toy. I just want you to experience the technique of the control class and see if you're interested in delving deeper into it. Do you understand the instruction manual?" Luonan didn't say anything. He turned his wrist and looked at the structure of the flywheel arm when it was bent. He combined it with the instruction manual and observed it carefully. Only then did he discover that when this thing was woven, it was divided into several layers. Each layer was independent, like a deformed fish scale armor. The layers were stacked on top of each other, but they weren't fragmented. There were only a dozen or so pieces. Chapter 391. Luo Nan nodded after looking inside and outside. He followed the instruction manual and pointed toward the jungle in front of Gear. Papercut hurried to stop him, indicating to Luo Nan to pay attention to the construction workers inside and outside Gear. Let's keep a low profile. Let's walk a bit deeper. Luo Nan hooked his lips into a cold smile. It's fine. They're experienced and knowledgeable. Papercut knew what Luo Nan meant, but he couldn't say anything. He laughed and pulled Luo Nan deeper into the jungle. They didn't walk 2 steps when Xue Lei turned from the jungle path. He saw the two pulling each other and was a bit stupefied. Where are you guys going? Leister, you're here. Papercut was quite familiar with Xue Lei. He chuckled and greeted him. Brother Papercut, Xue Lei responded. He finally found a reason. You guys came to class. Luo Nan sweated a bit when he heard this. Luckily, Papercut's answer was very vague. We came to inspect the goods. We can go take a look together. What goods? Xue Lei wasn't completely connected. Luo Nan's eyes were sharp. He could tell with a glance that this fellow had yet to give up his evil intentions. He wanted to drag Luo Nan to practice Sanzhou with him. Luo Nan even brought a set of Daoist clothes. How could he let Xue Lei have his way? He immediately made up his mind. He would rely on Brother Papercut's protection today. He would cling tightly to this thick thigh and make Xue Lei embarrassed to force him. His thoughts spun and he used the reason of trying out the control class to drag Xue Lei into the jungle. He turned his head and said, Brother Papercut, everyone's here today. Let's go get together tonight if we have nothing to do. Papercut went, huh? He was a bit surprised. He knew Luo Nan's temperament. Luo Nan could be considered pure and kind, but how could he understand the ways of the world? He had given Luo Nan lessons for over a dozen days, but he had never received this kind of treatment. Generally, fatties were more self-aware. Papercut asked, why did you suddenly think of this? You didn't invite me specifically, right? Who else? Luo Nan knew that the invitation came too abruptly. He didn't dare give Papercut too much time to think. He chuckled and gave himself more reasons and bargaining chips. Go. We're just playing together. I invited Leister. Yeah, and Cat Eyes. Huh. Papercut constantly changed his tone and words today. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to express his muddled thoughts. He couldn't help but ask, who are you talking about? Cat Eyes. Cat Eyes. Xue Lei was also stunned. Could it be that the gathering Luo Nan was talking about was different from the one he mentioned at noon? Luo Nan opened his mouth. He suddenly wanted to slap himself. Today he was a typical case of only caring about his head and not caring about the bottom. He only wanted to slack off, but he ended up piling up more troublesome things. Hey, don't rush to a conclusion. Luo Nan suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He blinked his eyes and a line of words came out of his mouth. Moreover, he didn't need to fake it. He hemmed and hawed as he said, didn't you say that she changed professions? Papercut thought that he understood when he saw Luo Nan's slightly embarrassed expression. He nodded at Luo Nan and laughed involuntarily. Don't think that Cat Eyes gave up on all-encompassing sensing because of you? Who told you that? This. Luo Nan averted his gaze. It's me. Xue Lei raised half of his arm and obediently admitted it. The source of his information was the gossip circulating on the psychic wave network. It had a deductive nature to it, so it was hard not to feel a bit awkward right now. Papercut looked at these two 16 or 17-year-old kids. He felt that the matter of education was a long way off. He felt a great sense of responsibility for a moment, and he earnestly and patiently explained, it's not called changing professions. It's just focusing on choosing a more suitable path of development. In the past, people looked forward to Cat Eye's long-range sensing the most, okay? You don't need to feel embarrassed about this, but don't spread it. After all, this rumor is meant to trample on people. If things go wrong, both sides will be ruined. Luo Nan and Xue Lei obediently lowered their heads and received the lecture. Papercut thought about the meeting at night and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Cat Eyes actually agreed? She doesn't feel embarrassed. Indeed, she wasn't embarrassed. She was dispirited. Luo Nan felt more and more that inviting Papercut to oversee things was a good choice. At the very least, there would be a buffer. They could get through the most awkward period of the early stages. As for how to communicate in depth and eliminate misunderstandings, Luo Nan could only act according to the circumstances. Since Cat Eyes had said this much, Papercut found it hard to refuse. He was worried that these two youngsters weren't good at the art of communication. They might do bad things out of good intentions, and they might really shed all pretenses of cordiality with Cat Eyes. Cat Eyes was quite famous in the society for her eccentric temperament. Since he had decided to participate, Papercut didn't waste his breath. He saved his strength for tonight. He sighed and brought back the main topic. Come. Let's first operate the flywheel arm. Though Luo Nan didn't have much interest in this type of combat machine, he still chose this one when he had to choose between sparring with it and Sans Ho. He immediately roused his spirits and prepared to mobilize his interference power according to the instructions on the manual. Papercut wanted to teach him how to aim first. The safety factor of this toy is quite high. Otherwise, with the sharpness, speed, and trajectory of the sheet, Luo Nan's palm would have been the first to be pierced. The safety settings were very successful, but the power was only average. At the very least, it was a level lower than normal firearms. Of course, it was fatal to normal people, but Luo Nan needed to consider it carefully against ability users. As Luo Nan was thinking, Papercut laughed from the side. This is an emergency shrapnel. It's used to scare people when you meet the enemy in a hurry. You used up all your strength just now, right? Luo Nan still needed to adapt to the changes in interference power after combining 3 orifices into one. He just laughed and tacitly agreed. Papercut continued to teach Luo Nan the trick. Did you notice that the emergency shrapnel just now was shot from the middle layer of many layers of armor? Every single one of them is like this. There is no way that the upper layer will be the first to fire. This is all for the sake of drawing support from the reaction force between them. The friction is sufficient to ignite fire. Feel it. Don't you think this makes sense? Luo Nan still didn't open his mouth. His mind sunk into the inner layer of the flywheel arm. He used his interference power once more to feel an irregular sheet in the middle. It trembled and hummed within the interlayer. It rotated at low speeds under the pressure of the same type of armor. It shifted slightly, constantly accumulating power. Excellent. You're drawing a bow without firing it. Layer upon layer of reinforcement. Nanster, you really do have talent in the control class. Papercut sighed unconsciously as he sighed in admiration. Did he have to watch the rising star of the activation class change professions? Luo Nan followed Papercut's explanation and controlled the increasingly active sheet within the wrist guard. The temperature of the inner layer of the wrist guard was rising, but there was no obvious change in the outer layer's temperature. The shielding effect was top-notch. Shuelei, who was next to Luo Nan, had keen senses. He sensed a few subtleties and came over with some curiosity. He even reached out to touch it, but Papercut slapped his hand away. What if I can't control it and it explodes? Luo Nan rolled his eyes. I think I can still hold on. Then continue. This toy will certainly become more powerful the longer it accumulates power. This was actually true. Luo Nan could feel that the sheet relied on its overall structure to accumulate power physically. It also relied on special materials to endlessly absorb interference power. Clearly, there was something unique about the single structure. The technical content of the flywheel arm was much higher than it appeared on the surface. Papercut spoke faster, introducing the firing mode to Luo Nan. If you want to attack, the flywheel arm itself has a built-in chip. It can be connected to intelligent equipment to preset a flight path, select a special-shaped sheet and calculate obstacles, air resistance and so on. It's very good for sniping in complex environments. Plus, we all have the Hexier. Saves quite a bit of effort. Luo Nan followed Papercut's instructions and made a wireless connection. Sure enough, an exquisite interface popped up on his retina. It displayed the real-time changing data according to the scene before him. Through the Hexier, all operations could be realized with telepathic control. Luo Nan randomly chose a target, and the interface used dotted lines to indicate the available routes. At the same time, it indicated the percentage of power needed for the best effect. Was this like playing a video game? Luo Nan didn't have a good or bad impression of this sort of idiotic operation. He was a rookie. The more complete the auxiliary functions, the more advantageous it would be for him. However, a true expert probably wouldn't like this sort of programmed setup. Papercut added before Luonan could finish his thoughts. Also, if you feel that you're awesome, you can choose mental control. This is a test of a person's continuous operation. Awesome people can even have 12 sharp blades fly around their body in unison. It's like controlling 12 flying swords. They can fight in close combat or attack from a distance. They can scare people to death even if they can't kill them. This is the proper way to use it. Luonan slightly swayed his arm. Since the flywheel arm was used by the control class, he should place more emphasis on microcontrol. Papercut spread his hands. You can say that, but the actual situation is different. You see, in order to guarantee the structural function, every combination of thin slices has a different shape. Their flight trajectories are different as well. There are also all sorts of splicing combinations. A normal person wouldn't be able to hold on if they didn't use smart equipment to calculate. Maybe architects and extraordinaries can do it, but who would count on them when it comes to that? That's true. Luonan raised his hand and fired according to smart mode. The irregular slices were dim but sharp. They instantly broke through the forest barrier of foliage, slicing off the thick branches that served as targets. They charged into the air before turning back. They buzzed as they spun in the air like a miniature chainsaw. Branches and leaves were shattered everywhere they went. The momentum was quite astonishing. Luonan fired a boomerang. The irregular slices circled back, their speed decreasing layer by layer. They fell to Luonan's wrist like a tired bird returning to its nest. Luonan continued to pour in his interference power, and the slices pieced back together. Papercut clapped his hands. Okay, you're getting started. It's just that your operation is too rigid. Actually, no matter if it's smart mode or free mode, you can switch between them. You can change directions at will and increase your power. If you're in combat, I suggest you first use smart control. You can design a good route and you can add mental control at the last moment. It saves you a lot of effort. It's sudden and flexible enough. The effect of catching your opponent off guard is still there. That's true. Luonan continued to practice in the forest. He didn't forget to let Shuelei have a taste in the middle of it. He pacified Shuelei's emotions and divided his mind, so that Shuelei wouldn't jump back to the topic of Sanzhou training. Time passed quickly and the sky was already dark. The three of them had enough fun in the nearby forest, so they prepared to return. Luonan's wristband vibrated at this time. It was a call from Xianxia. Her tone was a bit nervous. Junior Nan, I'm really sorry. There are some things I need to take care of in the society. Xianxia is doing experiments. We might have to go a bit later. Got it, senior sister Tian. Luonan didn't want to give Xianxia any more pressure. He was counting on this senior sister to suppress Mo Peng and the others. Papercut was baffled to the side. Who is it? You're also getting together in a bit? Luonan casually said, one of my senior sisters and her little brother. They're coming with us tonight. Outside the circle? Papercut was very surprised. Luonan had a guilty conscience from Papercut's reaction. He could only evade the important and dwell on the trivial. It's Xianxia. She's the one who became a hostage at Ocean Sky Cloud City. You've met her before, right? He looked at Papercut's expression and knew that he couldn't hide it any longer. He could only add, there are also two relatives of mine. Maybe there are also their friends. It's a gathering and it's at Frost River Reality. I'll just meet them face to face. I'll tell them about us later. Well, Papercut really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He reached out to point at Luonan again, but he was discouraged before he could open his mouth. You still have to learn in the future. Looks like there are quite a few people this time. Have you booked a room yet? A room. Luonan entered a stupefied state. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.